So what is the greatest debut by a rookie in Daytona 500 history? Oddly enough, it's not the Daytona 500 champions or first ballot Hall of Famers, as many of them struggled in their first Daytona 500 rodeo. Instead, there would be many less than stellar drivers that would make a big first impression on the biggest stage in NASCAR racing. Enter Scott Wimmer, a driver that was mostly subpar in his Cup Series career and never won a race. However, in his first Daytona 500, mired in legal controversies and stresses of being a rookie in this prestigious race, Scott Wimmer would remain stoic to have one of the greatest drives in his NASCAR Cup Series career. NRF Productions presents Scott Wimmer's impressive Daytona 500 debut. So Scott Wimmer's Daytona 500 honestly, legally, and morally should have never happened. On a January Saturday night in High Point, North Carolina, Scott Wimmer was just a chill guy. Okay, in all seriousness, this meme is cringe and it needs to stop.
It's time to stop!
Alright, what was I even talking about? Okay, so Scott Wimmer was set to begin his rookie season in the NASCAR Cup Series. That night, he was just chilling, driving a 2004 Dodge Ram pickup truck owned by his boss, Bill Davis. What he would do on that evening would stun the NASCAR world.
You're a dumbass!
Scott Wimmer plowed through a road sign and his Dodge Ram was found on its roof with several wheels and the driver missing. It turns out Scott Wimmer's blood alcohol level was 0.15, which is twice the legal limit in North Carolina.
You are literal human scum. You are a waste of cum, okay? You are the sandwich that deserves to be lit on fire. That's what you are.
Scared of the repercussions, Scott Wimmer scurried from the scene before getting arrested by police. Wimmer's wife Jody was also charged for obstructing and delaying the arrest of her husband.
What are you? An idiot sandwich.
So at that point in time, when it came to Scott Wimmer's racing career, you could say,
It is gone!
When you are a NASCAR Cup Series driver, you have a great responsibility to your team, your fans, and your sponsors. In that moment, Scott Wimmer massively let them all down. In fact, he just ignorantly disregarded everything, every privilege that he was granted. Scott Wimmer's racing career was over. Unless, of course, the company providing the sole multi-million-dollar check would be like the Grinch when his heart grew 2 times in size. Could Caterpillar not only forgive, but willing to be represented by a driver who was arrested for driving under the influence? It turns out the director of Caterpillar was sympathetic towards the 28-year-old. He deemed this as a terrible mistake and that this was an anomaly of how Scott Wimmer typically conducted himself. So obviously, Scott Wimmer, being an American citizen, meant that he had to face repercussions for his actions. Scott Wimmer's legal license was revoked, and logically, if you connect the dots, that would mean that Scott Wimmer's racing license would be revoked as well. However, even without a driver's license, NASCAR would still allow Scott Wimmer to race in Daytona. So I know what you guys are thinking. How does that make sense? How come Scott Wimmer can't drive on some back road at 25 miles per hour in bumfuck North Carolina, yet he can drive at 200 miles per hour inches away from competitors on the high banks of Daytona? Well, in this instance, NASCAR was adamant about letting the judicial process do its job, especially considering that Wimmer's hearing in High Point was scheduled for May 10th. This was just NASCAR as an organization continuing their fundamental belief that you are innocent before proving guilty. Just ask Kurt Busch and Matt Crafton. So Scott Wimmer made an egregious mistake, but you want to know what isn't a mistake? Becoming a member of the Digital Gas House Patreon. For just $5 a month, you can have your name at the end of every single NRF Productions and Fuel Cell full video. Or for $10 a month, you can still have your name at the end of every video, plus access to video scripts and early access to select NRF Productions and Fuel Cell full videos. Your contributions are appreciated, as I can put this money back into the channel to create full tank NASCAR content, And so because of that, I encourage you guys to join the Gas House gang today and become a Digital Gas House Patreon member. Despite all the controversy, Scott Wimmer and Bill Davis Racing showed up to Daytona with the same ambition as every other driver and team. They wanted to hoist the Harley J. Earl Trophy as Daytona 500 champions. In fact, Bill Davis Racing as an organization knew that feeling to reach the crest of the most prestigious race in all of stock car racing. Ward Burton's Dodge from the 2002 Daytona 500 was in the lobby for Scott Wimmer to look at every single day. That was the embodiment of what was possible if the driver, team, and pit crew could execute to the best of their ability in the greatest race in NASCAR history. Bill Davis Racing, this time wanting a strength in numbers, decided to field 2 entries in the 2004 Daytona 500, the 22 for Scott Wimmer and the 23 for Dave Blaney, giving a nice veteran-rookie combo to increase their odds of winning the 500. For Scott Wimmer, his rookie inexperience would show as 2004 Speed Weeks began. He was outperformed by his teammate Dave Blaney to where Bill Davis stated,
"Don't be surprised if the 23 is painted cat yellow and black for Talladega."
This was a credible report from Matt Yoakum, considering that he didn't go to the Carissa Thompson School of Journalism. Fortunately for Scott Wimmer, he would lock himself into the big show with a spot in row 13. Leading into the biggest race in all of NASCAR that was even bigger in 2004. For this race, the 44th President of the United States would give the famous command,
"Gentlemen, start your engines."
So George Bush, uttering those beautiful words, would usher in a culture shock of a 2004 NASCAR Nextel Cup Series season. This included veterans like Bill Elliott and Jerry Nadeau retiring in favor of a massive crop of rookies like Casey Kane, Brian Vickers, and Johnny Sauter joining the top ranks in top rides. As they say, drafting is like a high-speed game of chess. For the 7 newcomers in the Daytona 500, this was a different skill set to master. The Daytona 500 is a tough race for rookies, similar to how it is tough to land a job after college. You lack experience, but people don't want to give you that experience because you don't have experience. To make matters worse, it doesn't help that NASCAR mandates that the cars of rookies have 2 neon yellow stripes. Basically, it's just a massive sticker saying, "Hey, look at how inexperienced I am, take advantage of me." So as the 2004 Daytona 500 started to unwind, it would show that the rookie class for the most part was unfulfilled potential. Casey Kane failed to make it to the quarter mark as his car coasted with large doses of smoke coming out of the pipes. Brendan Gaughan would make a mistake all too common for a rookie, speeding on pit road. Then you had Johnny Sauter's first crack at the Daytona 500. Honestly, if I had to take a wild guess as to what Johnny Sauter's favorite NHL team was, my wild guess would be the Minnesota Wild. Johnny Sauter was a loose cannon in this race, judging how hard he blocked Tony Stewart, which by the way, at this point of the race, Johnny Sauter was a lap down. I'm pretty sure his performance was watched thoroughly by a 20-year-old Brad Keselowski. Johnny Sauter's car in this race had a hard time holding the bottom. With the ill-handling car, he would ultimately trigger the lone big one of the race. It was in that moment that Michael Waltrip came to the realization that,
"Yep, I'm flying through the air, this is not good."
This crash that made the Daytona backstretch look like Jimmy Spencer's junkyard ended the first Daytona 500s for Brian Vickers as well as Scott Riggs. However, despite blocking one of the most aggressive drivers and causing the big ones, believe it or not, but the Sauterisms were not over yet. The next restart, Sauter had a left rear fender rub, which left him now 3 laps down. Honestly, it's too bad Bob Costas didn't commentate this race, because he probably would have said of Johnny Sauter,
"We can only ask or wonder that he is asking some departed relative for forgiveness for this atrocious performance."
Somehow, the same thing couldn't be said about the driver that crashed his boss's truck, then got arrested for driving while intoxicated. So Scott Wimmer spent the week leading into the Daytona 500 answering all the media questions and owning up to his wrongdoings. He made it crystal clear that this was a mistake on his part and he took full accountability for what happened. The way Wimmer conducted himself in the 2004 Speed Weeks was that of a veteran, and this gained the admiration of several in the industry. However, the 28-year-old rookie didn't just conduct himself as a driver only in the media center that's been there, done that. On the racetrack, you could mistake him for Ward Burton, not just being in the Caterpillar number 22, but the way he drove this race. In fact, Scott Wimmer's approach to the 2004 Speed Weeks was seen as too conservative by Bill Davis. When Wimmer was asked what adjustments he wanted for the next run, he requested not to change anything. He didn't want to lose what he had. This was even as Scott Wimmer had a race engineer in Derek Finley. This was someone that walked out of a final exam to take a phone call from Dale Earnhardt. In the short term, that call might have led to him failing the exam, but in the long run, it paid off. That call got his foot in the door of racing as he would become DEI's first ever engineer. Having the proper organization behind him was making Scott Wimmer think and act like a veteran despite being an inexperienced rookie. By lap 137 of the race, Wimmer was up to third. An inexperienced rookie was really out here outperforming defending series champion Matt Kenseth, as well as two-time Daytona 500 winner Jeff Gordon. So Scott Wimmer had a decent car, but he was nowhere near the levels of the number 8 of Dale Earnhardt Jr. and the number 20 of Tony Stewart. There was no way he was going to win the Daytona 500 on speed. So as the 20, 8, 24, 16, and the 22 came onto pit road for the money stop of the day, Frank Stoddard decided to think outside the box. The 22 would try a similar strategy that Jeremy Mayfield did in the duels on Thursday. Scott Wimmer took just 2 tires and no adjustments to give the 22 car a 2.6 second lead. This was Frank Stoddard positioning Bill Davis Racing in the best position possible to try to win another Daytona 500. Still, it was clear that not only did the number 8 and the number 20 have the best handling cars, on this afternoon, Tony Stewart and Dale Earnhardt Jr. were basically brothers from another mother. The two would work together to catch the number 22 and you could just play the Jaws music. Scott Wimmer had almost no chance as a lone wolf to hold off the Alphas on a hard charge towards Daytona 500 victory. Dale Earnhardt Jr. in just his 5th Daytona 500 start would win the race that plagued his father for nearly 20 years. The other feel-good story of the Daytona 500 was the stellar performance of Scott Wimmer. Despite all of the legal controversies and being an inexperienced rookie in a race like the Daytona 500, Scott Wimmer climbed out of his Caterpillar Dodge with a podium finish in the big race. If you were a Scott Wimmer fan after this race, you just felt the sky was the limit. The NASCAR world had just witnessed a rookie that was put in a pressure cooker overcome that adversity and show some great maturity on the racetrack. Unfortunately, Scott Wimmer just did not have the results for the rest of his career. Still, this is something that deserves some recognition, as Scott Wimmer, as a rookie in the 2004 Daytona 500, stunned the NASCAR world. Be sure to check out these Daytona 500 videos and stay tuned to NRF Productions in January for more Daytona 500 content. Other than that, this is Nathan for Digital Gas House. Life's a beach, and then you drive.